Hello and welcome back to Irma Sofra. Today I'm showing you guys my version of Mantije. You don't want to miss this recipe, so keep watching. In previous videos, I show you how to make the dough as well as stretch it out. Please click on the links above so you guys can take a look at those videos before continuing on with the Mantije recipe. The only difference for the mantilla, we're going to separate our dough into 4 equal size balls. We're going to stretch them out just a little bit like I explained in the dough making process video, and then we're going to let those sit for an hour and a half on our countertop, greased up just like in the other video. Now before I begin, I have to mention that this is in no way, shape, or form the traditional and authentic way to make mantilla. This is Irma Sofra, so this is how I make my mantilla. I begin with ground beef and onion in a pan. The traditional method, they use raw meat and raw onions. To my ground beef, I'm going to be adding salt, pepper, and I'm going to be also adding vegeta. I really like the flavor that it gives off. Now, keeping in mind, we're using a lot of onion. Why? Because back home in the Balkans, they don't use a lot of meat. Why? Because meat is expensive. So they use a lot of filling, and the filling here is going to be onion. So you think you're getting a lot of meat in your mantilla or in your burak or whatever you're eating, but really you're just getting a lot of onion. So what we want to do is we want to cook this, and we're going to get to a point where all that liquid comes out of the meat. Once that liquid comes out, we're going to cook and cook and cook until all of that liquid evaporates. From there, we're going to cook this until we get a beautiful golden brown color on our meat and also on our onions. Now, we're not working with a lot of ingredients here. It's a very bland recipe. So we have to work with what we got. And what we're going to do by giving that color to the onions and the meat, it's going to give us this phenomenal flavor. And that's why I personally like cooking my meat and my onions rather than the traditional recipe where they're working with raw ingredients. As I mentioned before, I already show you how to stretch out the dough, so I'm not going to go in detail in this video for that. The link to that video where I stretch out the dough and talk about how I do it is right above, so please click on that. We're just going to stretch this out, and then I'm going to show you guys how I fold these up. Super easy too. My meat has cooled down completely. Another very important step is I'm going to take the meat and I'm just going to grind it up with my hands. I'm going to mash it up. What we want to do is we want to get nice fine pieces of the meat as well as the onions. You don't want a big chunk of meat and onion in your mantilla. Just like I mentioned before, I go in detail on how to stretch out the dough for this type of phyllo dough in the pita making video that's linked right above, so please follow that. We're going to do the exact same process. So we're going to be fluffing up the dough, stretching it out. So please watch that. Now for the filling part, what we're going to do is we're going to take roughly a teaspoon of that ground beef. We're going to place it down. Notice how I'm not placing it at the very end or edge of the dough. I'm giving it a little space, and I'm going to keep doing that. So I use my fingers kind of as like a guideline. So roughly an inch in between every teaspoon of meat. And all that's going to do is when we go to roll these and then eventually cut them, it's just going to help us for the folding process. We're not going to have meat oozing out, and it's going to be much easier for us to fold them into little bite-sized pockets of phyllo dough. I don't have an exact amount of how many teaspoons of the meat I place on each ball of dough. I just kind of eyeball it. But what I'm going to do is once I get to the very end, I'm then going to take my dough, just gently pick it up, and then I'm just going to place it over that meat. And then we're going to roll. And what I love about this recipe is it's so forgiving. So you could roll this very tightly, and we're folding these over and making little bite-sized bits, so it doesn't really matter. With pita, traditional rolled pita, the one that I made previously, you want it to be nice and fluffy and airy, but with this one it's very forgiving. So this is a really great beginner's recipe. Here I'm just cutting off that very crust, that very end of the dough, because we don't want them to be chewy. I talk about that in the previous video. And all I'm doing now is I'm just going to flick that dough. You guys see I'm doing that motion. I am just flicking, and then I have that air bubble right there. So what I'm going to do, whenever you have an air bubble, you're going to just gently pick up and place down, and that's just going to give us a nice even surface. Once I get to about like half of my countertop, I'm now going to pick up the dough gently, And I'm going to do that wave motion because we really want to stretch out that dough. We really want to get a nice flaky dough. So I'm stretching, pulling and stretching, pulling and stretching, and then you're just going to continue on with the pulling. And you guys see right there, I'm deflating that really large air bubble by just lightly picking up and going down. And then make sure you cut that very end of that dough over there. You guys see that crust right there that we don't want. We don't want it to be chewy, so make sure you cut that very end bit off. Once you've completely rolled up the mantilla, what you're going to do is pick it up and stretch just gently. We really want to stretch out that dough even more. So to cut up the mantilla, it's super simple. You're going to feel for those little gaps in between the teaspoons of meat, and then you're just going to fold over the very ends of the dough, and that's it. It's super, super simple. And you don't have to use meat. The great thing about this recipe is you can use just about anything: spinach, cheese, potato. I just personally love ground beef. That's like my favorite filling. But you guys can do just about anything. Comment down below and let me know what your favorite flavor is. Placing the mantilla in a lightly greased pan, what you want to do is make sure there's a little bit of space in between each mantilla because we want every single one to get beautiful and golden brown on each side. And then I just take roughly a teaspoon of oil in my hand and I'm going to pat the very top of the mantilla, and they're ready to bake. Once they're beautiful and golden brown on the bottom and on the top, we're now going to take some melted butter. I talk about that in the description box below, and I'm just going to brush them, and then I cover them with some foil and a clean kitchen cloth, and let them sit for roughly 2 to 3 minutes. And finally, our mantilla are done and ready to go. I serve them with some yogurt and some spicy banana peppers, and they are so good. Nice and flaky, but also soft at the same time, and that meat is packed with flavor. One of my favorite dishes. Thank you guys so much for watching Irma Sofra. Don't forget to like this video, comment down below, and tell me what recipe you want to see next. And I can't wait to see you guys next time on Irma Sofra.